Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds. And may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad wa ajil fajr. ظاهرك للفناء وباطنك أنا. Your external side is to perish, and your inner side, your batin, is me. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying this. Your union with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the objective. Your ultimate identity lies in this unity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeing Allah, knowing Allah, being in unity with Allah, all these important phrases have been alluded to in the traditions. Your identity is something much greater than just what it means to be a Swedish Muslim, for example. What are the halal and harams? That's only step one. And it's a very important step too. The step of the Sharia. It should never be taken lightly. It's essential for your salvation. But it's a minimum. Discussions of Muslim identity shouldn't be confined to these discussions. In Islam, the protocol is very evident. It's very black and white. It tells you what the halals are, tells you what the harams are. Doesn't matter which country you're living in. Just because you're in Sweden, it doesn't mean that you're different. The same that applies to people living in Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and so on and so forth, applies to you too. And try to get this out of your minds, that just because you're living in Sweden, it's more difficult to be a Muslim. That's also a bit misleading. There are some advantages living here, in relation to your salvation even. There are some things which unfortunately have become, everyone's saying the same thing wherever I go. It's very difficult to be in America or to be in Sweden and being a Muslim. Don't force that upon yourselves mentally. There are many challenges and obstacles even for Muslims living in Iran. Why do you think we have traditions that say, when you go to Mecca, when you go to Medina, don't stay for more than 3 days? See, these are important to understand. Don't stay for more than 3 days. It's not something wajib, it's just an ethical instruction. It's very difficult to live in countries which are very religious by name or have religious shrines there. It's very difficult to preserve oneself. Most people fall. Anyway, that's another discussion. Identity isn't only what's halal and haram. If that was it, then it would be the same for all Muslims, irrespective of where they're living. Our identity is much higher. Lies in something great, lies in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then last night we spoke about taqwa. And I went through a few of the different stages of taqwa, just to try to explain that taqwa is much deeper than just doing the wajibat and refraining from the muharramat. And I wasn't able to finish the discussion, and today's discussion is something else. It's on the Sirat. According to the advertisement, I have 5 discussions to give. The second is on the Sirat, but with your permission, I may have to change a bit. Because, these 5 discussions, each of them take many hours. I won't be able to finish them, in one session. So I may have to, if you accept, just change the order of speeches sometimes. The Sirat, though, the path, is also important to know our identity. What does Sirat mean? When we ask Allah to guide us on the straight path, in all our adiyah, our supplications, where it says, As-Siratu Haqq. What is this Sirat referring to? Assalamu alaikum. It's okay. The Sirat is important. And it's important in your endeavor in finding your true identity as well. And that's what I'll be speaking about. Some of the esoteric dimensions of the Sirat. And then from these esoteric dimensions, a political message can be extracted from it too. And inshallah we'll go through it slowly. Now, Ibn Arabi, who I spoke about last night for a bit, who was a Shia mystic, he has a book called Futuhat. And it's a very strong book in Irfan, in Islamic mysticism. Maybe it's one of the most difficult of books, or the last book they read usually. And the story goes that when he wrote Futuhat, in Mecca, it's called Futuhat al-Makkiyah, in Mecca he would put all the pages, the script of his book, on the roof of the Kaaba. And then he would implore before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever, I'm not sure if this is 100% true, it may be apocryphal, I'm not sure, but this is what they've told us. So he put all the paper on the roof of the Kaaba and he would ask Allah to remove the pages which aren't correct, so to speak. And he would leave the pieces of paper on the roof of the Kaaba for a year. And after a year he would come back and he would take those which would remain. Now this may not be true, the story, but Ibn Arabi is an important figure in Islam. Not the person himself, his writings are important. His commentary of the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, on the verses of the Holy Quran, are very important. When Imam Khomeini wrote a letter to Gorbachev almost, I think, 25 years ago, which was a letter to the West in general, he spoke about many Islamic figures. Avicenna, Sohrawardi, Mullah Sadra. But when it came to Ibn Arabi, he praised Ibn Arabi the most. This is Imam Khomeini. He's an important figure. We have to explore this. His writings, his teachings have to be shared amongst, especially those in the West. In his Futuhat, he writes, this is where I want to enter the discussion of what is the Sirat. He says, أَنَّ النَّارَ مِنْ أَعْظَمِ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ. Verily, the hellfire, hell, is one of the mightiest of creations. وَهِيَ سِجْنُ اللَّهِ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. And this hell is Allah's prison in the hereafter. وَهِيَ تَهْوِي عَلَى حَرُورٍ وَزَمْهَرِيرٍ. And it comprises of severe heat and severe freeze. severe coldness. ففيها البرد على أقصى درجاته والحرور على أقصى درجاته. And in hell there will be, or there is, coldness of the most maximum intensity of coldnesses. وَالْحَرُورُ عَلَى أَقْصَى دَرَجَاتِ. And this heat at its maximum intensity too. وَبَيْنَ أَعْلَاهَا وَقَعْرِهَا 75 إلى 100 من السنين. And from the top of hell to the bottom of hell, the length is 75 to 100 years. Now, as will be apparent, that 75 to 100 years is referring to our life expectancy on earth. وَهِيَ دَارٌ حَرُورُهَا هَوَاءٌ مُحْتَرِقٌ. And hell is an abode whose air is a blazing fire. لَا جَمَرَ لَهَا سِوَى بَنِي آدَمَ. And it has no fuel save for, i.e. the fuel of hell is nothing but Bani Adam, which is human beings. وَالْأَحْجَارِ الْمُتَّخَذَةِ آلِهَةً. And stones that have been taken as idols. وَالْجِنِّ اللَّهَبَهَا. And also jinn. That's the fuel for hellfire. كَمَا قَالَ. As Allah has said in the Quran, in chapter 2 verse 24, وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ. In relation to the hellfire, its fuel is only nas and stones, man and stones. وَقَالَ. And Allah has said, chapter 21 verse 98, إِنَّكُمْ. Verily you, وَتَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. And that which you worship other than Allah, حَسَبُ جَهَنَّمَ. That will be the fuel of hell. You and that which you worshipped other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no red monster with horns awaiting for you in another place, that when you die, that monster will wait to whip you or burn you. Allah punishes no one. There's no need for Allah to punish anyone. Do you think there's a need for Allah to punish you if you don't do salat? Why should Allah punish you? It doesn't affect Allah a bit whether you do salat or not. Hell is a manifestation of your own actions, what you did in this world. Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. This world is the farmyard of the hereafter. Whatever you reap, whatever you sow, you will reap in the hereafter. But it's all to do with you and your actions. And your hereafter will be different to your hereafter, will be different to your hereafter. Everyone will have their own hereafter. The hereafter isn't like this world, which is collective and social. Everyone has their own hereafter. It's all about you and your actions. You sin, you're creating your hell. You do good deeds, you're creating your heaven. From action to action, from moment to moment, you're in the process of creating your own heaven and hell. It exists now, but we can't see it. Some people can, but that's not important. Usually on death, we see the hereafter. It's possible to see the hereafter whilst alive in this world. It's possible to see barzakh. It's possible to experience qiyamah before having a physical death, according to explicit verses of the Quran. But usually we can't see it. In the Quran and in the traditions, we have a lot of them which refers to this reality. In chapter 4 verse 10, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. Those who consume the property of orphans wrongfully, they're consuming in their stomachs fire. That's the reality of this sin. It's fire. Now this fire isn't a physical fire. Otherwise we would have experienced it right now. It's fire of a barzakhi nature. It's a bit difficult to explain this right now, but imagine someone in your dreams approaches you with fire and throws the fire at you. You wake up. But in barzakh, in the hereafter, there's no waking up. You will suffer. It's not a physical fire, but it's a fire which tortures, even more than physical fire. And that fire is with you now every time you sin. But on physical death, the torture starts. Someone asked the Holy Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, where are we all going after this? He wanted to know, where am I going after all these years living in this world? What's it all for? What's the goal? Where am I heading towards? And he replied, إِنَّمَا هِيَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ تُرَدُّ إِلَيْكُمْ. It's your actions that you will be heading towards. Whatever is in the hereafter is a construct of your own actions. It's all about how you acted in this world. Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. So you're punishing yourselves. You're creating your own hell. It's nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't blame Him. It's all about your actions. And you are your actions. In chapter 11 verse 46, قال, Allah said, Ya Nuh, O Noah, in relation to Noah's son, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. Your son isn't one of your family. إِنَّهُ, your son is عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. Your son is non-righteous actions. We are our actions. Our identity is pivoted around our actions. Okay. Then Ibn Arabi continues. When he spoke about fire and hell in general, he said, وَمِنْ أَعْجَبَ مَا رَوَيْنَاهُ أَنْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Now we want, in Futuhat, in this section, he said, he wants to refer to one of, according to him, the most incredible of traditions narrated from the Holy Messenger of Islam. This must be very important. When Ibn Arabi says, this is one of the most incredible of traditions, there must be something important here. There's an important message here. Now maybe most of you have heard this tradition before, but haven't gone through the esoteric dimensions of it, haven't dissected it maybe as you should have. And this is the tradition. Ibn Arabi has it in his Futuhat. إنه كان قائدا مع أصحابه في المسجد. The Holy Prophet of Islam was sitting with his companions in the mosque, most probably referring to the mosque in Medina. فَسَمِعُوا حَدَّةً عَظِيمًا. Then they heard, the companions, they heard a mighty, a loud sound or noise. فَارْتَاءُوا. The companions became alarmed. They were scared. فَقَالَ. The Holy Messenger said, أَتَعْرِفُونَ مَا هَذِهِ الْحَدَّةِ. Do you know what this sound is? Do you know what it is? قَالُوا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَعْلَمُ. The companion said, Allah knows better. The Messenger of Allah knows better. Then he went and described what this loud sound was. Now this loud sound, if me and you were there, or those who weren't companions, who were living or were residing at a farther place, they wouldn't have been able to hear this sound. Even if me and you were there, we wouldn't have been able to hear it. This wasn't a physical sound. It was a sound of a realm of the hereafter. We call it in Arabic tamathulat. It was an apparition. Now, inshallah, from tomorrow we'll be entering the discussion of tamathulat in more detail. But this wasn't an ordinary physical sound. It was a sound of another realm, not of this physical realm. It was another realm, an immaterial realm. Because only this realm is physical. All the other realms are immaterial. And they're realms of the soul. Don't think that the soul is something which is inside this physical body. It's something very great. Just because of the way we're living, we don't have access to the true essence of what we are. Inna lillah. We're all Allah's. We emanated from Allah. We always were. Wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And we'll all be returning to Him. We always will be. Anyway, they all heard a sound. They were alarmed. Do you know what this sound is? The Holy Prophet said. They said, no, you know. Allah knows. Qala, the Holy Messenger replied, Hijrun. It's a stone. Ulqiya min a'la jahannam mundu 70 sana. It was a stone thrown from the top of hell 70 years ago. وَالْآنَ وَصَلَ إِلَىٰ قَعْرِهَا. And only now it reached the bottom of hell after 70 years. فَكَانَ مِنْ وُصُولِهِ إِلَىٰ قَعْرِهَا وَسُقُوطِهِ فِيهَا هَذِهِ الْحَدَّةِ. And this sound that you've just heard it's reaching the bottom of hell. This downfall of the stone, and it's reaching the bottom of hell. That was the sound when it made contact with the bottom of hell. فَمَا فَرَقَ مِنْ كَلَامِهِ إِلَّا وَالصُّرَاخُ فِي دَارِ مُنَافِقٍ مِنَ الْمُنَافِقِينَ. And just as the Holy Prophet finished saying what this stone was, screams and lamentations were heard from the house of a munafiq, from the residence of a munafiq nearby. Lamentations were heard because the munafiq had just passed away right then. قد مات. The munafiq had died. وَكَانَ عُمْرُهُ 70 سَنَةً. And the life of that munafiq was 70 years. He lived up to 70. The Prophet was explaining what the sound was. He's saying it was a stone thrown from the top of hell. It reached the bottom. At the same time, the munafiq's house, there were lamentations heard from the residents, because the munafiq had died at 70 years of age. That stone was thrown from the top of hell 70 years ago. These are important concepts to take in consideration. It's important for what I want to say later. The stone was thrown 70 years ago. The munafiq died at 70. وَكَانَ عُمْرُهُ 70 سَنَةً. فَقَالَ Allahu Akbar. On noticing that the munafiq had died, and had died at 70, the Holy Prophet said, Allahu Akbar. فَعَلِمَتْ عُلَمَاءُ الصَّحَابَةِ أَنَّ هَذَا الْحَجَرَ هُوَ ذَلِكَ الْمُنَافِقِ. The ulama amongst the Sahaba, amongst the companions. Ulama is the plural of alim. It's not the plural of alim. The plural of alim is alimun or alimin, depending on the case. But alim is someone who has acquired gnosis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True irfan in relation to Allah, knows Allah as Allah should be known. The plural of alim is ulama. And that's open for everyone. You don't have to be a scholar from a hose to be alim. Not all alims are alim, and not all alims are alims. That's not a prerequisite. Those who were alim amongst the companions, they realized that this stone was the munafiq. They realized the stone that had resulted in that sound, the stone is the munafiq. وَأَنَّهُ مُنْذُ خَلَقَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى يَهْوِي فِي جَهَنَّمَ. And since Allah created the munafiq, since birth, that munafiq was always in hell. Now, I'll explain what that means in a minute. He was always in hell. وَبَلَغَ عُمْرُهُ 70 سَنَةً فَلَمَّا مَاتَ حَصَلَ فِي قَعْرِهَا. And he had lived up to 70. On reaching the end of hell, he died. On reaching the end, the bottom of hell, he died. Now, these are just preliminary concepts I want to share with you before we enter what the Sirati is. Okay, first of all, why is the munafiq referred to as a stone? As I said, we are our actions. Many of us in the hereafter won't have the phenotype, the external appearance that we have now in Barzakh. Many of us will appear as monkeys, exactly like a monkey. Some of us like pigs, some of us like cows, some of us wolves, predators. And the traditions on this are abundant. You are and will be in accordance with how you act in this world. You may even be a stone. A stone, after years and years, it never evolves. It's always the same. It's a stone. It never evolves into a better state. The munafiq too, after 70 years, one sees no evolution of faith within him or her. He hasn't improved to any degree after all these years, just like a stone. And many of us will appear stones. These actions will be manifested. It may be manifested into millions and millions of different manifestations. All those manifestations being in unity with us. They are us. They're a creation of us. Then it says that the munafiq was always in hell since Allah created him. وَأَنَّهُ مُنْذُ خَلَقَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى يَهْوِي فِي جَهَنَّمَ. He was always in hell. Since creation, since he was created. What does that mean? Here, this on physical creation, which is at 4 months, around 4 months gestation in the mother's womb, there the relationship and the association between the body and the soul starts. And there's a physical fetus, and also there's a barzakhi you at the same time. It's not physical. It's of a barzakhi nature. It's an immaterial nature. There's no physical thing about it. But it has physical properties such as size, shape, color, and so on and so forth. On birth, at 2 years of age, 3 years of age, 4 years of age, you have the physical creation, and you also have this barzakhi creation. Even now, if someone, let's say, is 38 years old, he has this 38-year-old barzakhi I at the same time. But before puberty, those few years before puberty, there's no duty assigned for me and you. Many things which children can do, we're not allowed to do. It's haram for us. But for them, the Sharia has no particular prescription for them. They say it's okay for children. If they do those actions, it's harmless to them. But after puberty, the relationship between your actions and that barzakhi you, your actions being the fuel for your barzakh, those sins will create fire, will create the monkey, the pig, or whatever. But you can't see the barzakhi you at present. As far as you know, it may be a pig, a gorilla. It can be anything. You all know the story of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam during Hajj time, where one of the disciples said, Alhamdulillah, all these Hajjis. Then the Imam, with this particular agenda in mind, a particular objective to show the brother something, opened his 2 fingers for the disciple to see the barzakhi reality of those Hajjis. And they were all animals. After puberty, we're assigned with the Sharia. Sorry, yes. Yes, where was I? before puberty, our nafs is nafsul ammara, ammara bisu, the soul which commands towards evil. And that's harmless before puberty. You are in hell. What you produce is hell, but it's harmless. After puberty, nafsul amara is not harmless anymore. If you don't abide by the Sharia, if you don't learn how to tame the soul after puberty, if you don't do this, you will remain in hell. But after puberty, we have to start and abide by the Sharia to make that nafs come out of being nafsul ammara towards nafsul mutma'inna. Nafs, there's only one soul. It has degrees. It's not as if there are 3 different souls. The reality of the soul is one, but there are degrees to it. Before puberty, it's harmless though. It's so harmless that we have no duty to abide by the Sharia. So when we say we're in hell before puberty, it's harmless though. But it's nafsul ammara. Children have nafsul ammara. You know, we say it in England, we say it in Farsi too. When you say to children, oh, you little devil. Yes, they're all devils. But that's harmless. They're in hell. But that's a harmless thing. After puberty though, if you continue being a devil, then you're always in hell. That's why, for 70 years, since he was created, the munafiq was always in hell. Because before puberty, that was a harmless hell, that's okay. But after puberty, he chose to, by his actions, to remain in hell. And then when he reached the bottom of hell, he died. Now this is another very important concept. Death. Because death has a particular definition in Islam. When the soul becomes independent from the body, we die. That's the definition of death. Although death, there are 2 types of death. Natural death and forced death. Natural death is when the soul becomes independent from the body. It's now independent from the body. Perfection-wise. I.e., for the believer, he's reached a level of perfection that with this body of his, he can't acquire more perfection anymore. He's reached that level of perfection that were he to live further or more, he wouldn't acquire any further perfection. Now with this physical body, the soul now has become independent from the body, and then the person dies. This also applies to the munafiq. But perfection has a different meaning here. With the munafiq, they've reached a perfection not in virtue, like the believer, but they've reached a perfection in vice. They've committed so much vice during their life that after 70 years, they're not able to acquire any more vice, any more badness or evil. With this physical body, the soul becomes independent from the body and they die. That's the definition of natural death. However, most of us, we don't experience natural death. We'll probably have the other type of death, which is a forced death, due to our sins in relation to believers, or our lifestyle. If you smoked, or if you did this action, that action, due to that unhealthy body, in accordance with how we lived, we forced the soul to exit the body because of the way we lived. That's called forced death. But natural death is when one's lifestyle was normal and one didn't sin. One reached a certain level of perfection in virtue that he couldn't or she couldn't acquire further perfection. The soul becomes independent and exits the body. And the same applies with the munafiq. After 70 years, this munafiq couldn't acquire any further vice, perfection-wise. His level of perfection in vice had reached its maximum, and the soul exited the body. Okay, now, Imam Khomeini, his daughter-in-law, the wife of the late Sayyid Ahmad Khomeini, kept on persisting that the Imam write her a letter of guidance, of ethical instructions. And Imam kept on saying, no, there's no need. At the end he gave in and wrote his daughter-in-law this letter. It's an Irfani letter with ethical instructions. In this letter, Imam wrote this tradition of the stone hitting the ground, making a loud noise. He wrote the whole tradition. And then he said in the letter, Imam said, we're all on a Sirat. We're all on a Sirat, the path. And the Sirat is in this world. And its batin, its inner dimension, its esoteric dimension, will be manifested in the hereafter. The Sirat of the Munafiq was that 70-year downfall, which manifested as a stone. The Munafiq was his Sirat, he created his own Sirat, and he created it via his actions in this world. 70 years of bad actions was his Sirat. But the Sirat is here in this world. This world and the hereafter, it's one reality. Different realms, different manifestations. It's the same reality though. When the traditions speak that the Sirat is thinner than hair, sharper than a sword, well yes, it's in this world. One step out of line, one sin can cause your downfall, especially if you don't repent. It's very difficult to tread upon the Sirat in this world. But everything is in this world. Everything is to be acquired in this world. You take to the hereafter what you acquire in this world. And everyone builds their own Sirat. My Sirat is different to your Sirat, different to their Sirat. Everyone is the creator of their own Sirat by means of their actions. Now, with respect to the Sirat, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has a very important tradition. They've only given me up to 7:30. If I can just request more time. I don't want this discussion also to be made defective like yesterday. Imam Sadiq in relation to the Sirat said, هو الطريق إلى معرفة الله. The Sirat is the way to knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the Sirat. وَهُمَا سِرَاتَانِ. And this one Sirat, which is one reality, is in fact two Sirats. The Sirat is only one, but it has two manifestations. Siratun fi dunya wa siratun fil akhirah. See, when Imam said the Sirat is in this world, Siratun, it's one Sirat in this world And there's one Sirat in the hereafter. There's one Sirat, different manifestations of it though. Then Imam Sadiq continues, وَأَمَّا السِّرَاطُ الَّذِي فِي الدُّنْيَا, concerning the Sirat which is in this world, فَهُوَ الْإِمَامُ الْمُفْتَرَضُ الطَّاعَةِ, it's the Imam whose abidance is wajib, whose abidance is necessary. So it's not only referring to the physical entity of the Imam, it's abiding by the teachings of that Imam. Man arafahu, whoever gets to know the Imam, fi dunya waqtada bihudahu, not only knowing them, but abiding by their guidance, marra ala sirat alladhi jisru jahannama fil akhirah, they will transcend. They will pass through the Sirat in the hereafter and transcend hell. There will be no hell for them. If you recite the salawat. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا, whoever doesn't get to know the Imam in this world, زَلَّتْ قَدَمُهُ عَنِ السِّرَاطِ فِي الْآخِرَةِ, their feet will tremble upon the Sirat in the hereafter. فَتَرَدَّوْا فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ, and they will fall into hell. The Sirat is here, and it will always remain here until the day of resurrection. And then it's another manifestation of the Sirat. And the Sirat is the Imam whose abidance is necessary until the day of resurrection. There's always going to be an Imam until the day of resurrection. And that Imam has two functions. One is in relation to the teachings of Islam, but more importantly with the Imam, it's enforcing Islam. Islam has to be enforced. It has to be applied. And there will be an Imam until the day of resurrection, because Islam has to be practiced, enforced and applied until the last day. That's why we claim Islam is a comprehensive religion, a universal religion, and an eternal religion. It always has to be enforced. If there's going to be periods of time where there's no enforcement of Islam, that's an abrogated form of Islam. So there always must be an Imam. Now, this next verse, it's not difficult. You just have to bear with me a bit. Chapter 344. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجه. Muhammad is but a messenger. He's only a messenger. This is all connected to Sirat. قد خلت من قبله الرسل, and there were messengers who had passed before him. أفإن مات أو قتل, if he dies or if he's killed, انقلبتم على أعقابكم, will you turn against or turn away on your heels? انقلبتم على أعقابكم, will you turn back just because he's dead or he's been killed? Because in the battle of Uhud, when the rumors were spread that the messenger has been killed, many people turned back. وَمَن يَنْقَلِبْ عَلَىٰ عَقِبَيْهِ, anyone who turns back on his heels, فَلَا يَضُرَّ اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. They will never harm Allah in the least. وَسَيَجْزِي اللَّهُ الشَّاكِرِينَ. And soon Allah will reward the shakirin. The shakirin here referring to the mukhlasin. That I'll speak about later, inshallah. Now, Allame Tabatabai in Al-Mizan, on this turning back on your heels. So just because the Prophet, if the Prophet were to die, if he was to be killed, will you turn back on your heels? Here Allame Tabatabai has said, this turning back on your heels is tantamount to returning to non-Islamic rule. Because there was Islamic governance at the time. Just because the Prophet is dead, or just because the Prophet is killed, will you turn back on your heels? Would you want to just go back to non-Islamic governance again? Then he says that this verse, which is revealed in a reprimanding and chastising context, means the following. I've translated this from Al-Mizan. That the Holy Messenger is nothing more than a messenger, like all previous messengers whose function is but to propagate the message of his Lord. And in brackets, he owns no other function. As long as Allah subsists, and Allah always subsists, He is self-subsistent, religion will remain. Hence it makes no sense to say that faith is dependent on the Prophet's life. It makes no sense to say that religion is dependent on the Prophet's life, as is portrayed by many of you who plan to abandon religion were he to die, and to turn back on your heels, and thus opt for deviation after having trod upon guidance. Just because the Prophet dies or will be killed doesn't mean it's an end to religion. Religion will always continue until the day of resurrection. The Sirat will always be there until the day of resurrection. And elsewhere, Allame has said that it's understood from this verse that the Muslims ought not to allow Islamic governance, because at the time there was Islamic governance, to slip out of their hands. Right. Okay. We only have 15 minutes until the very end. I thought that maybe after the talk we can have question and answers or discussions, but they said even for the question and answer and discussions we only have 15 minutes. But this is quite important, what I want to say. Would it be okay just to finish the speech, or yes, and have the question and answers tomorrow, inshallah? Yes. I personally, I am free during the day and after the speech. Whoever wants to ask me, there's no time limit on my behalf. So Allame says it's understood, this is from another book, it's understood from this verse that the Muslims ought not to allow Islamic governance to slip out of their hands following the demise of the Holy Messenger. That's what we get from this. There's no reason for you to turn back on your heels. You have Islamic governance. Islamic governance is to stay. Religion is here to stay. Just because the Prophet dies, does that mean there's an end to religion? The enforcement of Islam has to continue. The enforcement and the application of Islam isn't dependent on the life of the Prophet. The socio-political, judiciary aspects of Islam all have to continue. It doesn't make sense to say if the Prophet dies, Islam comes to an end. Most of the traditions that we have is in relation to the socio-political, judiciary aspects of Islam. How to manage an ummah, what the judicial affairs of the Ummah is, and so on and so forth. If we put an end to that Islam where it's only fasting and praying, that's an abrogated form of Islam. That's not true Islam. This enforcement of religion has to always continue. If you just think about it, why do you think thousands of prophets were murdered, were assassinated, were slain and slaughtered? Why were they slaughtered? It wasn't a matter of because they were teaching Islam. It was something more deep. Giving the halals and the harams wasn't the reason they were slaughtered. In one verse of the Holy Quran, when the verse is praising those who spread Islam, الَّذِينَ يُبَلِّغُونَ رِسَالَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَخْشَوْنَهُ, those who propagate the messages of Allah and fear Him, Allah. وَلَا يَخْشَوْنَ أَحَدًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ, they fear no one but Allah. Just explaining what the halal and harams are, there's no reason to fear Allah. But it's when you want to speak against injustice, when you want to speak about what justice means, what oppression is, when you want to enforce it, things become more difficult then. That's why they were killed. They wanted to speak on a par with true justice. They always wanted to go against the zulm which was predominating their environments. All of the prophets, many prophets weren't Rasul, they were just prophets. Once the Prophet and Nabi is given the status of Imama, they become a Rasul. It's a duty to establish a religious government. But still, that doesn't mean the prophets they don't have a duty to establish religious government, but they have a duty to fight against oppression. They have a duty to say what adl is and what dhulm is, and who adil is and who the zalim is. The Prophet has to do that, and that's why they were slaughtered. If the message was only ahkam, just giving the rulings, they wouldn't be praised so much in that verse, and there was no need to fear anything, and they wouldn't be killed, but thousands were slaughtered. In chapter 346, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن نَبِيٍّ قَاتَلَ مَعَهُ رِبِّيُّونَ كَثِيرٌ, how many a prophet there has been with whom many godly men have fought. فَمَا وَهَنُوا لَمَا أَصَابَهُمْ, they would never falter with that which they encountered. If they encountered zulm and oppression, they would go against it. If it meant giving their lives, they would give their lives. وَمَا ضَعُفُوا, neither did they weaken. وَمَا اسْتَكَانُوا, they wouldn't abase themselves, dishonor themselves. If you remain silent against oppression, you're debasing yourself. You're dishonoring the essence of yourself. Now, what was it which required all these godly men to fight with these prophets? Most of these prophets didn't have a duty to establish religious governance, but being a prophet, they had a duty to fight against oppression, to fight against corruption, despotism, and so on and so forth. So just because the Holy Prophet, if he dies, there's no end to religion. Religion continues. After the Holy Prophet, we had 12 Imams. Their names have been explicitly written. They were endorsed explicitly by the Holy Prophet, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then with the 12th Imam, something occurred which led to his occultation. He's alive, he's with us today, but he's in ghaiba, occultation. He may be in occultation for another 100,000 years, we don't know. Unfortunately, Mahdaviya has been, the propagation of Mahdaviya has gone out of control sometimes. People are giving themselves the right to say X is the Yamani, Y is the Khurasani, Z is Shaybani. This is outside our field. If you hear these things, just put it aside and continue on what your duty should be during occultation. Inshallah, his coming will be tomorrow, but there's a way to propagate this message, not through the signs. The signs are very ambiguous. Every 10 or 20 or 50 years we get the same thing happening, and the same signs are interpreted the same different way. Anyway, with occultation, now we don't have the Imam present with us. This is the point here. Does that mean an end to Islam? Does that mean an end to the socio-political, judicial aspects of Islam? That we should only do the fasting and the praying until the 12th Imam comes? According to the logic of that verse I started with, the answer is definitely no. The verse read, Ma Muhammadun illa Rasul. Allah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil fajr. Now, during occultation, the same verse can be reinterpreted like this: Wa ma mahdiyun illa imam. قد خلت من قبله الأئمة. The verse read, قد خلت من قبله الرسل. Many messengers have passed before him. Here now we say, قد خلت من قبله الأئمة. There were many imams before him, before the 12th Imam. The verse read, أفإن مات أو قتل. If he dies or is killed, will you turn back on your heels? أفإن غاب. If he disappears in occultation, انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Will you turn back on your heels? Does that mean it's an end to Islamic governance, like those at the Battle of Uhud thought it was an end? Is that an end to Islamic governance before the 12th Imam comes? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, the Sirat is the Imam whose abidance is wajib. Who is the Imam today? Does that mean Islam is on hold for another, for now it's been almost 1400 years, it may be another 1400 years, it may be more. Should Islam be kept on hold? But the Sirat is always with us, and the Sirat is the Imam. Who's the Imam? See, things are difficult. Things become difficult here. If you don't be careful, that Islam that you will be living by will be an abrogated form of Islam. You have to appreciate who the Imam is today. Well, the Imam is the 12th Imam. There's no doubt about that. But he's an occultation. Does that mean you have to turn back on your heels? No. Islamic governance has to continue. Now, with the 12th Imam, he was a complete manifestation of Allah's attributes. There's no one like the 12th Imam. But he was only an Imam. That doesn't mean just because in occultation Islam has to be on hold. It's our duty, to the best of our capacity, to continue with our Sirat. And therefore someone who is pious, who is learned, who is aware of the socio-political needs of the Ummah, has to continue as a manifestation of the 12th Imam, has to continue the teachings of Islam. Islam never finishes. Islam is an eternal religion, will always be. Just because he's gone into occultation, it doesn't justify you turning back on your heels. انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Allah is speaking with every one of us today. And that's what the concept of Vërejtje is. Now, of course, the Vërejtje, if it be one person, or maybe in the future it may be a council of people, whatever, it will never, you can't even compare them to the 12th Imam. They're not even the dirt under the nails of the 12th Imam. No one is doubting that. But Islam has to continue to the best of our capacity. And that's why we have Vërejtje. So that Islamic governance continues. Now, it will never be 100%. And the Vërejtje, of course, they won't be ma'soom. And Islam will never be 100% before the coming of the 12th Imam. For example, in Iran, it may be 80%, 60%, it may even be 40%. There's no prejudice, there's no need to. But you have to find the Imam today. It's your duty. Who is the Imam whose abidance is necessary today? If you don't find it, Vërejtje has a process, how it's chosen. For some people it's X. Some people may not accept X as the Vërejtje. They may have someone else. That doesn't matter for now. That requires another discussion. But the concept of Vërejtje is important for your salvation. I'm not saying if you don't accept it, you will go to hell. No, I'm not even saying that. But it's important to be a true Muslim today, in relation to that identity, in relation to your Sirat. You have to continue this path. Now, those who are chosen, who are believed to be the best representatives, to be that representative of the 12th Imam, to be the Vërejtje for the Islamic Ummah at large, of course it will never be 100%, but you have to choose the best that there is. There's a link between the Imam and your Sirat. Just because the Imam has gone into occultation, it doesn't mean that there's an end to religious governance. Now, in one verse, same chapter, 149, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who believe, in tuti'u alladhina kafaru, if you abide by those who are kafir. Okay, so we've spoken about the Sirat. We've spoken about the relationship between Sirat and the Imam, through which Islam continues. Then he's saying, O believers, these are all in the same chapter, one after the other, verse after the other. So you have to abide by someone who is a true manifestation of the 12th Imam, 12th Imam's teachings, to the best that there is. O you who believe, if you abide though by those who are kafir, يَرُدُّوكُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِكُمْ. See, أَعْقَابِكُمْ, how many times it's been repeated in these few verses? they will revert you, make you turn back on your heels. Because we have to follow what religious law says. If you follow kafir law, non-Muslim law, they will make you fall back on your heels. فَتَنْغَلِبُوا خَاسِرِينَ, and you will be one of the losers. بَلِ اللَّهُ مَوْلَاكُمْ, but Allah is your master. Now here things become a bit relevant to Muslims in the West, especially during election time. Can we vote? Can we not vote? If we can't vote, are there any exceptions to voting? You see, all these are linked with one another. According to primary principles, when you have a non-Muslim candidate, let's imagine presidential elections, or here, and you don't have a president here, you have a prime minister like we have in England. A non-Muslim candidate with X manifesto, whatever the manifesto is, being a non-Muslim and having this manifesto in itself will entail a degree of fasad, a degree of corruption. Now that corruption may be political, doctrinal, ethical, but the fact that they're not a Muslim has that embedded within them. So you're voting in a non-Muslim to rule over you is haram according to first principles, because you're strengthening political, doctrinal or ethical facade with the coming of this man. That's first principles though. But let me finish. There are exceptions and I have to go through them. So here in non-Muslim countries, if you have two candidates, A and B, and both of them are non-Muslim, according to primary principles, voting for either will lead to fasad. And as Muslims, you can't participate or contribute to the strengthening of fasad. So it's haram. But the fuqaha have given exceptions. They say that if one of the candidates, they're entering the political scene, their presence as the Prime Minister leads to a substantial and significant increase in the welfare of Muslims. There, it's a fight between two evils, and you're choosing the lesser of two evils. And there, it would be okay to vote. Finished, yes. Okay, inshallah, we'll continue with this. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.